Welcome back, family, to the South Florida Recruiting Report. I'm Marcus Benjamin here representing for On Three Rivals, South Florida Recruiting Reporter, here to talk a little recruiting in the Sunshine State. A lot of talent in this state, as always, and the 2026, 27, and 28 classes are not disappointing at all. Here to talk about it all, I've got Andy Villamarzo, who covers the high school side of things for Rivals to kind of discuss a little recruiting today. Thanks for joining me today, Andy.
Hey, thank you for having me on, Marcus.
Awesome stuff. So, you, like myself, have been kind of traveling around to different high school football games. I know that you've probably gone even out of the state. I've seen some out of the state schools. We, of course, were at modern day St. Thomas, which was a great one. Of course, Chaminade St. Francis, not such a great a game in itself. Just kind of tell me about, what you've been up to as far as the games that you've been going to and who's impressed you the most so far as top performing players.
Well, I would love to say it's all been within the friendly confines of the Sunshine State, but it hasn't. It's kind of been anywhere and everywhere. Starting actually the week before we were at that Broward County Classic, I was up in Georgia for a few games, Buford and Milton to kind of kick things off, and then ventured over to Grayson Collins Hill on a Friday night, and then got to be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, home of the Falcons, for they host this Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic, which was pretty neat. And then that following week there with all the teams, top teams down in South Florida against kind of the national contenders, as you will, outside. But most recently, got to catch Mater Day over at Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. That was, I think,
Nice.
I think that one kind of lived up to the billing of what you would say is kind of a battle of heavyweights on the national level. When we think teams from Florida traveling out to Vegas, last one comes to mind is Miami Central. A couple years back, they went out there, and pretty cool place for Cheetah Field. Got the mountains in the background, kind of I don't know. Definitely an upscale area. If you had to kind of tie it to what kind of neighborhood are you in, and really good game. But when you're looking at like top performers out of the state of Florida, Marcus, the team that like comes right to mind for me, just because they're at the top of the rankings, and I know they get a lot of flack because they're not really what we would say is homegrown talent. It's kind of talent coming from every which way. But IMG Academy, IMG Academy. I guess I'm somebody that went into the season thinking maybe they weren't going to be exactly the dominant program they've always been. I've always kind of, just based on last year, the way they kind of ended the season, getting blown out by St. Francis Academy. They had that surprise loss at Corner Canyon over in Utah. But some of the guys that they've had that have been really, just kind of stepping up. Jaden Wade, the 2028 quarterback, he's really done a nice job just kind of, I'd say, managing the offense, because that's kind of what you got to do at IMG Academy. When you watch them play, you're like, this is a very balanced football team for all the weapons they have. Obviously, like Eric McFarland comes right to mind when we think of like stars on that team. But I would say the player they've leaned on offensively is Lekai Tompkins, the running back, Louisville commit. He's every time I feel like IMG plays, he's been their guy. Like he's the guy they want to lean on out of the backfield. And looking around the state, I think Anthony McQueen over at Miami Central has done a really nice job. I think last year people kind of forget what he did because they had to forfeit a bunch of games. and
Yeah.
you see 1-9, so you're kind of like, I mean, what did he do? They didn't win any games, right? But I mean, he's come on his senior year, done a really nice job. Um, I mean, I think a lot of the guys we've expected to kind of step up this season. Neiman Lawrence's, Calvin Russell, James Johnson over at Northwestern, obviously Julius Jones over at St. Thomas Aquinas, Mason Mallory. I mean, talk about somebody who's kind of really boosted his stock when you're talking about transferred over from West Boca Raton, goes to St. Thomas Aquinas. I think everybody was kind of wondering, well, who's going to emerge out of that quarterback battle, because they had a couple other guys that were in the running. I mean, that first game against Mater Dei, he a little shaky in the first half, but then in the second half, it was, Mallory kind of showed why he was able to lead the Bulls to a Class 6A state championship. And kind of like funny stat, Marcus, they allowed 26 points in that game. In the next 4 games, Aquinas has only allowed 26 points. So they've outscored their opponents 190-26 after allowing 26 to Mater Dei. So just to kind of throw that out there, the Raiders have, if anyone thought that the loss to Mater Dei was some kind of admiration or they were kind of worried about them, it's like, no. I think St. Thomas is St. Thomas, and they're kind of keeping on, their journey over to winning another state championship. But it's going to be hard for anybody to upend them.
Yeah, I consider them definitely my top team here in South Florida, St. Thomas. And I think it's a pretty big gap too from St. Thomas to the rest of the pack down here in South Florida. Just because Miami Northwestern, who we thought was gonna be really good, they lost to Orange Lutheran, who ended up losing a game themselves later down the line. And then Miami Central is a team that we thought was going to start to rise, and they are still undefeated right now. And I'm glad you mentioned Anthony McQueen. That kid's undefeated as a starter. I don't think people realize that. And he's not getting enough recruiting love. I think he should get a little bit more than what he's getting right now. And then you got American Heritage, who obviously are going through the loss of their quarterback in Diabell to injury, a season-ending injury. And they've got a new quarterback trying to figure it all out in Leon Strotter. We'll talk a little bit more about him a little bit later in this pod. And then, of course, you got the Chaminade Madonna Lions, who aren't the Chaminade Madonna of old, with, JJ and JoJo and CJ and those guys. But they are definitely still a strong team down here in South Florida. I might even rank them maybe second or maybe 2A or 2B with maybe Miami Northwestern and Central. Those are probably my top 3 teams kind of at the moment. But with St. Thomas, though, since you mentioned IMG, I'm just going to throw this out there. It's not really on scheduled topics that we were going to talk about, but IMG or St. Thomas, who wins that game right now?
Ooh, man, one, I would pay to see that game, and I know we get into these games for no cost, but I mean, I would pay to see that. I think that would be a really good. Just you talk about like the line of scrimmage, and that's where I think when people wonder, like, what is the difference when we're talking about like nationally ranked or, these top state ranked teams across the country versus like your kind of like average Joe type team. It's like up front is the difference. And for these two teams, that's where they've lived in when you're looking at the line of scrimmage. And I would be interested in just the matchups there. I think there's just so many that I would be just really like eyeballing and saying, how are they going to defend? Like, how are they going to block him? Mark Matthews versus like a Zyron Forsall or Jake Kroll. Yeah. I think any of us would love to see that one-on-one and see who could win those matchups. obviously Justice Fitzpatrick versus Eric McFarland. Like
Absolutely.
we would love to see that. Man, you know, with the way IMG's playing right now, it's at such a high level. And I'm not saying it would be any more than like a touchdown. I feel like this would be if there was, you know, creating a line for high school football. I know there's no betting. There's no betting, folks. Um, yeah, it'd have to be like 6.5 or something, right? Like, or something. It'd be within a touchdown. It's not going to be anything more than that. I think
Yeah, I would say it's
the
a little bit
way,
lower. I would say it's -3 to whoever the home team is.
yeah, and IMG doesn't really have a home crowd. It's like it's not your typical like, okay, we got this huge fan base and everybody comes to see IMG because they're almost like this. I don't want to say they're a circus in a way of like a mess. They're like a circus like attraction because everybody wants to see them. It was weird. Like up in New Jersey, you had Bergen Catholic against East St. Louis. Nice crowd, just about packed. IMG plays and they play Winslow Township, which is a kind of like a nearby team, and the place is packed. And it seemed like everybody just wanted to see IMG. It's like they're just they're this, I don't know, the legend of a team because you see the name and you're like, I got to see this team that's filled with 5-star, 4-star talents. And
Yeah.
I think against St. Thomas Aquinas, though, we're talking coaching matchup too, right? Like you got Greg Studradois with IMG Academy, the former Ohio State offensive line coach, and then you got Roger Harriet and his guys, and you know he would have them absolutely prepared for a game like this, just like he did with Mater Dei. Made his adjustments at halftime, and then kept them in that game. So I would take IMG like right now, based on,
Yeah.
you know, if it was like a mid-season matchup. I think in a state championship game though, like if this was like, hey, let's enter like a California realm of things. This is like an open division title. IMG's eligible to play. Oh man, this would be awesome. You got IMG
Yeah.
and St. Thomas Aquinas at Pitbull Stadium, the last game of the FHSA series. I don't know. I feel like it'd be hard to bet against. I mean, they're going for a 7th straight state title this year. I mean,
Yeah, that's
that's
insane.
unheard of.
It's
Yeah. So
insane.
I feel like mid-season, I would take IMG based on how they're playing right now. But I think in a state title game, I'm going with St. Thomas Aquinas. I feel like, how do you bet against those guys when it comes to the end? It seems
Yeah.
like they're always ready.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's really about time that my IMG just incorporate themselves in the FHSAA. I don't understand like why. I mean, I get it, but I think the talent in Florida is good enough to challenge them. I mean, we've seen IMG lose games to teams in the past. Miami Central, beat IMG a couple years back. I know Heritage beat them a few years before that. So it's not like teams can't beat IMG or they're impossible to beat. I think they should be incorporated in the state title race. I don't see why they shouldn't be at this point. I mean, that they're a national team just like St. Thomas is a national team. So I think they should definitely be incorporated in that. We were watching highlights of Lakai Thompson, by the way, the outstanding running back from IMG, and he, of course, transferred from Tennessee to IMG, and IMG is probably the school that, kind of like how you mentioned before, they are the team that just kind of grab players from all over the country to play for its team. But now it's happening with every. It seems like with every team, the transfer portal has kind of become this monster that continues to evolve and transform. And this season, as you know, Andy, it's been 2 weeks into the season, and players are transferring to different teams, and people are wondering, are like, oh, what are the rules behind this? Is this illegal? That type of thing, or is this even morally right for a kid who's in high school to transfer to a different high school for football reasons? And I'm going to give my opinion first about it. I think it's okay, because considering how players are getting paid now on the high school level, and of course at the college level as well, I think they should have that leeway to pretty much kind of go wherever they want. But I do feel there should be some kind of rules when it comes to transferring, because my question is like, okay, well, can a kid transfer like the week before the last week of the regular season? So like if a team like who's entering the playoffs, could they just grab a 4-star kid from a team that's 2-8 and just add that player to their team, that type of thing? That I don't think should happen. And there should be some kind of deadline, just like a trade deadline in the NFL, that type of thing. But I don't have an issue with players, transferring right now. To be honest with you, I don't have an issue with it. Some people do. What say you?
Well, I wrote something. I wrote a column. It was about a week and a half ago, and I titled it "Winning in high school football means quote unquote keeping up with the Joneses." And I think
Yeah.
like if you're a Gen, yeah, I feel like for us millennials, we know that phrase. We look at it as a yeah, you're trying to obviously like keep up with everybody around you when it comes to social status and everything else in life. But when it comes to high school football, and I feel like it's not just high school football, right? It that kind of trickles down or into college and the NFL is winning. You got to win because no matter the level you're on, winning really means everything. And winning doesn't mean like historically you did this 10 years ago or you did it 5 years ago, or heck, even now it's like a couple years ago is relatively old. It's what have you done for me lately? And you got to be able to win. And winning, obviously, I think correlates with transferring. You as a player want to be a part of a winning program. You want to, you don't. We look at social media in a certain way, like those. When you see your team on the losing end of something, it obviously hits different, right? Like you see the graphic, you lost. People are kind of like speaking on your potential downfall or demise. Obviously, like an American Heritage is probably seeing that, and that's not something they're used to. I mean, sitting at I believe what 1-3 right now or 2-3. I mean, for them that's like an unheard of record at the midway point of any season. And they get a Leon Strotter, and you see, for me, like I looked at how people reacted to the news that he transferred, and that was probably one of the most viewed tweets, at least that I've had in quite some time, probably since Teddy was named the head coach at Miami Northwestern. And the last time I looked at that tweet, it had over like 160,000 views for Strotter transferring. And to me, that just kind of spoke to everybody looking at that going, this is a quarterback who just led a team to a state championship. Now, if you're not somebody who's in Florida and you didn't know that probably one of the top 2028 quarterbacks in the country transferred into Northwestern during the offseason, you're kind of like, I mean, man, Neiman Lawrence and Leon Strotter, good thing, me, you, or anybody else isn't having to make that decision of who you're going to start. But I mean, both guys, I think from the outside looking in, we're thinking more like a platooning situation. Now, obviously, for whatever reason, Strotter ended up transferring. I think surface level, people were looking at it like, wow, this is almost like free agency in a sense. Like, whatever happened at Northwestern happened. He transfers into the most perfect situation. Diabell ends up, having to be out for the rest of the season due to an injury, and just slide right in. Strotter, you're the starting quarterback of a team
Yeah.
that is a contender for Florida's Class 4A state championship, and that I think obviously sent shockwaves of like, I mean, look at the quarterbacks we've seen already move. You've seen Darion Jones leave Chaminade to go to Venice. He's already made an impact. Um, a reported Joaquin Cavalcese, a Arkansas commit, transfer from Lakeland over to Gaither. Hasn't played
Yeah.
yet. Don't know the status of when he may take the field. But I think quarterback movement has really been. I would tie it to. I mean, one is winning. Not that Lakeland isn't winning, but some situations obviously are different than others. But I would say the other couple, I mean, are obviously like go into the school, have a chance to win first and foremost, and they're having a chance to play. So I think for me, transferring, I believe the state of Florida and maybe around the country should make it to where you get one freebie, like just to curb the slowdown. Because when you see kids moving to multiple schools in 1 year, I think it's just like way too much freedom to kind of just leave a situation so quickly, as fast as you got there.
Yeah.
I feel like you get one freebie, and then if you're like, I got to do this again, well, guess what? You got to sit out a year. Like, and that's just my opinion, because I feel like if everybody was allowed to do whatever they want when it comes to moving around like that, I mean, it would be, I mean, it already is pretty wonky as it is, but it obviously would create major issues moving forward and into the future, because it only gets magnified and gets worse over time. Because I would say we have this conversation 3 years ago. We're like, oh well, transfers are happening, but it was worse in 2022 than it was in 2021, and then so on and so forth. We're like, well, worse in 2023 than it was in 2022. I mean, somebody asked me, they're like, is this the most like high profile names you've seen move in season? And I felt pretty confident in saying, yeah, I think it is. I think this is the most high profile names, like when we're thinking of, you know, household names in Florida high school football that you would know if you follow it, and saying, yeah, these are kids that probably the most I've seen in any season, so far, just because you got a lot of you got kids that obviously were impactful at some point at a school, and they now move, once or twice. So it's I don't know. I guess it all depends what your what your like beliefs are, but I'm with you a little bit. Just I think there's got to be a way to curb it. I think we can't allow it to just kind of spiral out of control.
Yeah, I hear you. The only other name that I could think about that transferred mid-season that was somewhat of a big name was Yule Keith Brown a while back. He transferred, at least down here in South Florida. I'm kind of plugged into South Florida kids. Was It was a Gulliver, and in mid-season he transferred to Miami Central and was actually a really big part of that team winning a state championship that year. Remember, the state championship was in Tallahassee at Doak that year. So it's not the first time, obviously. But yeah, I agree with you. I feel like this is probably the most high profile type of guys that are have transferred. And I wouldn't be surprised if other players transferred in the next upcoming weeks as well. Just because players and teams are unhappy with their performances, and want to see what they can do in a different situation at another program. And like I said, not mad at it. Leon Strouder, as we see him kind of warming up for his game before Miami Central, I think he did pretty well for a guy who just kind of got there. A few, probably the ink hasn't even dried on him signing over there, and like he went out there and almost beat Miami Central. They were up 21-9 in the third quarter of that game before Anthony McQueen and Joshua Joseph, the Georgia State commit, kind of led the Rockets back to a 31-21 victory to keep that team undefeated. So, yeah, I think this is something that is going to continue. I just like the transfer portal in college football. I think it's kind of it's part of the game now, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. Um, Lastly, before I get you out of here, Andy, I do want to talk just a little college football. Obviously, I'm dialed in recruiting. You're dialed into high school football, and these are in preparation for the college game. And what we've seen in the state of Florida, obviously, where we're down here in the Sunshine State, is that recruits will kind of just like how they're transferring from different schools, they're flipping from different programs that they're committed to, and uh, I think we're going to see a lot more of those type of situations in the upcoming weeks with the Florida Gators. Florida has a murderer's row of a schedule coming up. They play Texas this week, and of course Georgia down the line. The list kind of goes on and on. Florida State, of course, at the end of the year. The list goes on and on of the teams that they play, and they're already 1-3. They've already lost to South Florida. Do you think Billy Napier loses his job um, if he loses to Texas this week?
You know, I've been kind of reading up on the money situation. I think if it was kind of more clear cut, there was like a cheaper path, let's say, to finding cause other than losing. Um, I think, yeah, I could see that, right after that game, or I think I was kind of like with some people a little surprised, but not knowing like kind of the monies that is still owed, because they're still paying on coaches that they had, like Dan Mullen per se, and McElwain. I mean, I think they're still paying on monies to these coaches that have been ousted in the past. So I'd say I feel like they're gonna let him kind of ride this out. I mean, I do understand like it's impactful, with every loss that it
Still there, Andy? You kind of froze up on my end. Looks like we lost Andy for a second. Let's see. Just to kind of piggyback on what he was saying there. Um, I understand kind of what he's saying, and as far as them waiting it out, but I don't see it. If they lose three more games, which they don't actually play Texas this week. They're off this week. They play next week. I think you know if they lose to Texas, and then lose to Texas A&M, and then lose to Mississippi State. I find it really hard to believe that he keeps his job after those 3 games. You're looking at 1-6 at that point, and basically not making a bowl game. I think he's definitely out at that point. I don't think you really need to kind of keep him in the fold at that point. And I think a lot of those players from that recruiting class will look to go elsewhere. Um, they've got a ton of great players in their class, and I think I would say most of them will be looking elsewhere if Billy Napier does be become get fired here. So yeah, I mean that's something definitely to watch in the next upcoming weeks when it comes to recruiting in the state of Florida. Will Billy Napier be fired from the Florida Gators because that was kind of sending shockwaves throughout the whole state when it comes to recruiting. Um, so we'll see how that ends up. And that is going to wrap it up. I don't see Andy coming back here. So that's going to wrap it up for the South Florida recruiting report. This will be a show that that I will kind of put on every week just to kind of give people updates on South Florida recruiting. We're going to talk a little bit about underrated players more in South Florida that needs to get a little bit more love here. And also, of course, since I'm dialed in with the Miami Hurricanes, we'll talk more about recruiting with the Miami Hurricanes. They did just add a big time player in Frederick Santius. This is a guy who is rising in the rankings. He is very talented defensive lineman. He's a guy that I think can make an impact that they needed a defensive lineman for that 2026 class. So they're able to find a gem in that. He was committed to FAU, decommitted right before that USF game, visited for USF, then visited for Florida, and then Miami was able to close on him, and it looks like Miami has another gem there. I do feel like there's going to be a couple of other players that they'll add to the 2026 and 2027 class, and we'll see how they do there. But that's going to wrap it up for the South Florida Recruiting Report, and until the next episode.